Senator Ted Cruz is joining the podcast today. I want to ask him about the radicalism of the Biden administration and also how to fight woke culture in politics and in society. The left thinks that if the Supreme Court overturns Roe versus Wade, it will energize the left politically, especially for the midterms next year. I'm going to show you why that's not the case. How the left is doing its best to drive away Latinos, even as Republicans are getting better at courting them. The media's low motives for the demonization of Roseanne Boyland. And I'll also conclude my discussion of tyranny in Julius Caesar. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
I want to talk about the politics of abortion. I've talked previously about the immorality of abortion. I've talked about the constitutionality of it. But the left is now warning that if the Supreme Court overturns Roe versus Wade or upholds the Mississippi law, the law that says that no abortions, with very rare exceptions, after 15 weeks, the left is saying that's going to energize us, that's going to fire us up, that's going to bring out the young people, that's going to fire up the suburban moms, that's going to help us to hold on to both the House and the Senate in the midterms next year. Now, this has been a kind of mantra on the left for a while. Here is Representative Ted Lieu. He goes, it's going to be a blue wave next year if the court overturns Roe. Representative Jackie Speier, the country hasn't seen the rage of women speaking out. And however, as strategists, and in this case, Democratic strategists, have taken a closer look at the politics of abortion, they have come to realize, or they're starting to realize, there's an article in Politico about this, that the politics of abortion is not going to cut quite in the way that their rhetoric suggests. First of all, if the Supreme Court overturns Roe, the right will have won a huge victory, probably its first massive victory since Roe itself. And so this could have an energizing influence on the right, spurring it on to other victories. Think about the way, for example, that the Brown decision energized who? It didn't energize the segregationists. It energized the civil rights movement to then push for the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Bill. So momentum leads to momentum. The left tried this abortion kind of scare in the Youngkin race in Virginia. Right as McAuliffe was getting into trouble over issues like schools, public schools, he pivoted to Roe versus Wade. Oh, there's a 6-3 majority in the Supreme Court. They're going to overturn Roe versus Wade. And guess what? It turns out it didn't help him at all. It was supposed to be this great motivator that's going to bring suburban moms over to or keep them in the Democratic camp, and that in Virginia did not happen. Going back to 2016, remember Hillary Clinton had made, listen, we've got to save Roe v. Wade. We've got to protect it. She made it one of the centerpieces of her campaign. And after the vote, after Trump won, the post-election data showed that for most voters, this was just not fundamentally important. Only one in 5 voters said, this is critical for me. And guess what? Of those voters who thought abortion was critical, more of them voted pro-life than pro-choice. Similarly, in 2020, the Democrats tried the abortion issue again, but it turned out, again, in post-election data, not to have been a critical decision, really, that helped Biden get over the top. Now, there's an interesting survey just out, and the survey is being somewhat misreported. I'm looking at a headline in The Hill: majority oppose overturning Roe v. Wade. This is kind of the standard headline: majority oppose overturning Roe v. Wade. Interestingly, when you look into the poll, you discover that Roe v. Wade, which essentially allows abortion for all 9 months. Why? Because even though technically Roe v. Wade allows abortion to the point of viability and says that states can regulate abortion after that, they can't regulate abortion if, quote, the life or the health of the mother is at stake. And it's always easy for a woman to say, well, my health is at stake. It doesn't have to be my physical health. It could be my emotional health. So as a matter of fact, Roe means abortion for 36 weeks, for all 9 months. Now, how many Americans support that? As it turns out, 8%. 8%. If you look inside this poll, which shows that, quote, a majority oppose overturning Roe versus Wade, it turns out that 56% of Americans support limiting abortion to exactly the point where the Mississippi law puts it, 15 weeks. So in other words, a majority of Americans appear to be in this position. They think abortion should be allowed in the early months of pregnancy and not allowed in the latter months of pregnancy. Remember that the Mississippi law, which appears to be in some ways a halfway measure, is an overturning of Roe versus Wade. It's an overturning of Roe versus Wade in two ways. First, Roe set the limit at viability. And of course, a fetus is generally not viable at 15 weeks. The point of viability is around 22 to 23 weeks. So right there, Roe is essentially obsolete. But second, as I mentioned, Roe really allows abortion for all 9 months. And so any substantive regulation of abortion on the part of the Supreme Court would in fact constitute an overturning of Roe versus Wade. Christmas will be here sooner than you think. It's time to get that shopping done and get the gifts lined up. My idea for you, MyPillow all the way. Now, MyPillow doesn't have, as you know, their box stores, their shopping channels. They've been part of this vicious cancel culture. But Mike Lindell is going to take those savings that would have normally gone to the box stores, the shopping channels. He's going to pass it right directly to you. You can get the lowest price in the history of MyPillow for the classic standard MyPillow, normally $69.98, but now $19.98 with promo code Dinesh. These wonderful pillows, they won't go flat. You can wash and dry them as often as you want. They maintain their shape. They're made in the USA. Queen size pillows, by the way, regularly $79.98, now $24.98. King size, regularly $89.98, now $29.98. And MyPillow isn't just pillows. They have over 150 products, all of them with deep discounts, everything from sleepwear to my new beds. Go to mypillow.com or call 800-876-0227. Use promo code Dinesh to take advantage of Mike's special offers, not just on the pillows, but also on the other products. That number again, 800-876-0227, or go to mypillow.com. Make sure to use promo code DINESH, Dinesh. Guys, I'm really happy to have Senator Ted Cruz joining me on the podcast. You know Ted Cruz, but by way of background, he was at the Department of Justice and the FTC during the Bush administration. He's the former Solicitor General of Texas, and now, of course, U.S. Senator from Texas. Ted, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you. If I'm not mistaken, I think we met in 2012 when I released the Obama film, and you and your team had bought a theater out in Houston to show the movie. Was that, am I remembering right?
You know, I think that's right, that's the first time we met. I was a fan of yours long before then, but I think that's the first time we met in person.
Ted, I want to ask you about a bunch of issues going on in the news today, but maybe I'll start by asking you to take a little bit of a step back here, because we've seen a radicalism on the part of the Biden administration from day one. And maybe at the beginning they thought, let's see what we can get away with. But they've been noticing that their polls have been nosediving and plummeting. Their policies are unpopular. And yet they've been pushing ahead with a seemingly brazen and reckless indifference. How do you explain what would normally seem to be just politically obtuse behavior? What are the Democrats trying to do here?
Look, I think what has happened is Biden is scared of the left wing in his party. That all of the anger, all of the energy in the Democratic Party is on the radical left. It's with the socialists, it's with the extremists, and those are the people with pitchforks and torches coming after them right now. And it's a dynamic that plays out in the Senate too, where the agenda is being driven by Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and AOC. And a lot of the Democratic senators recognize, okay, this stuff's pretty loopy, but they just don't have the courage to stand up to them. They're so scared of their left wing that and I think Biden has made a political determination. You know, most of Biden's career, he's tried to carve out something of a course as a centrist moderate. That's certainly how he ran last year, as a reasonable centrist moderate. And I think he's just made a political calculation that the angry left gets what they want. And it, I think that has some short-term logic in that it avoids, Chuck Schumer's scared of being primaried from the left in the Democratic primary. But I think long-term, the policies that they're embracing are insane. And I think that's the reason 2022 is going to be a very, very good. I think it's going to be a phenomenal election year. And I think 2024 is going to be a phenomenal election year, because they are going to such an extreme radical place that it's far out of line with where the American people are.
Now, there's a little bit of a craziness, not just in politics right now, but I would say even in the country more generally. And do you think that this diagnosis of submitting or succumbing to the far left is also happening, let's say, in corporate America and in the military and other sectors that have previously been somewhat immune to the contamination of the far left? But, why would General Milley, who doesn't look like he's a far leftist himself, why would the head of Delta Airlines or American Airlines, who presumably aren't Antifa types? So aren't you supplying here a little bit of a broader analysis of something that's happening, not just in politics, but more broadly in society?
Yeah, look, those are great examples. And let's take the three examples you teed up, because I know all three of those individuals quite well. I've spent a lot of time with all three of them. There are structural reasons this is happening. With regard to General Milley, I don't think he's a leftist. I think he is political. And he responds. Look, I've been in the Oval Office multiple times with General Milley, with Donald Trump, and he would happily kiss Trump's behind. He had no qualms at all about kissing Trump's behind. I think he's political, and whoever his boss is, that's the team he's on at that moment. I met General Milley when he was a 3-star general. He was the commander of Fort Hood in Texas. And that's when I got to know General Milley. I think the woke nonsense he's embracing now is just the reality that Joe Biden's president, and he's interested in staying chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And so if doing that is required, putting on the woke uniform and saluting, that's what he's doing. You look at corporate America, and it's a little bit of a different dynamic. So the CEOs of Delta and American, neither one of them are leftists. But what has happened is the left has seized control of institutions in our society. The media is one of them. Universities are another of them. Hollywood is another of them. You're battling at all these terrains. Corporate America is their newest victim, their newest captive. And what they've done, so I had the CEO of American Airlines in my office last week, and I had some very direct and very harsh words for Americans' recent wokeness. His answer was very straightforward. He said, look, he was getting hammered from his own employees, from his shareholders. And what has happened, so the left, they've organized databases of left-wing employees at every big company, of shareholders at every big company. And they hammer these companies with emails. So CEOs are terrified of their own employees. And part of the problem is a lot of these employees are the 20-something woke kids who came out of universities where cancel culture was being born. And we kind of thought it was cute and stupid. And look at these stupid little kids that want to cancel everything. Well, now they're 20-somethings and they're at the companies. And when the company says or does anything, they bring out the torches and pitchforks. And these CEOs are risk averse. They're scared. And the problem for corporate America is right now, it is a rational cost benefit analysis to give in to the mob. They're doing it because, why do they go take a position? Why does Delta Airline take a position? Because they've got their own employees emailing and mad. And why are you supporting these horrible racists? Are you a racist too? And these CEOs are like, oh crap, When you have the mob outside your house wanting to burn it down, the natural instinct, particularly for people that are not very political, is look, give the mob what they want so they leave me alone.
Yeah,
and the left has organized the mob, and it's working.
Yeah, I think what you're describing, though, is a mob that is inside and outside the house, isn't it? In other words,
yes.
The CEO could normally say, I'm the CEO, you're the employee, so you listen to me, I don't listen to you. But I think they know that these young millennials are going to go running to the New York Times, and then the New York Times will do an expose about why the CEO is a racist, and that's what he's really afraid about, is the scissors-like motion of the internal and external factors working together.
Yes, but it's more organic than that, because it's not even the New York Times. Look, some of this dynamic, I know you've read Bari Weiss's phenomenal resignation letter, where she describes these 20-something kids that have destroyed the New York Times. I mean, look, they fired the editor of the opinion pages of the New York Times because he dared to publish an op-ed from a sitting Republican senator. I mean, it was asinine. And by the way, the editor is a knee-jerk liberal who disagreed with every word in the op-ed. The op-ed wasn't even particularly good. I didn't happen to agree with it, but it was fine. You know, Tom Cotton wrote an op-ed, and the kids at the New York Times were like, "My God, you platformed a fascist," and he gets fired. It's not even the New York Times will write an expose. It's Twitter will get mad at you. It's the woke Twitter warriors just chirping at each other, and people are scared. You know, I was out in California last summer and with some friends. You know, Heidi's from California. Her family's out there, and we were with a family friend who's a kindergarten teacher who was saying, she said, "I am scared to speak. There is a McCarthyist wind in the air, and if I say the wrong thing, I'm fired. My life." And she said, "I just don't say anything." And I think there are a lot of people that are terrified, and these CEOs. They're all cowards. They're terrified of the mob calling them racists. And that's, of course, the number one card the left has, is if you're not a Marxist, you're a racist. If you're not a socialist, you're a racist. If you don't support open borders and chaos, you're a racist. If you don't support abolishing the police and letting criminals go, you're a racist. Whatever they want, they accuse you of being a racist, and today's CEOs are terrified of that, and so they're giving in. And it's the same dynamic. I do think you have a good insight here, Dinesh. Democratic senators giving into the mob and CEOs giving into the mob, they're just scared. They're scared and they're cowards. And what the right hasn't done that we need to do, we need to change the cost-benefit analysis. And that's something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, talking to various thinkers about. Look, for the hard leftists, fine, they're going to do what they're going to do. But for the utterly apolitical CEO running a business, we need to make it so the cost and benefit of, do I give into the woke mob? The cost is at least as great as the benefit of it. Right now, it's an easy decision. We need to change that calculus.
When we come back, I'll pick this up with Ted Cruz in a minute. After taking Balance of Nature, Debbie and I, we've noticed an increase in energy. And for Debbie also, regularity was a problem. It was solved with this. It's called the fiber and spice. Now, we love taking Balance of Nature because we can't possibly eat the correct servings of fruits and veggies every day. So for us, this is a great solution. In fact, our technical director, Brian, who's right here, he got curious about Balance of Nature. So I said, hey, try it. And he says it gives him a renewed burst of energy. Brian, what do you think? You're here. Just pop your head in. How do you like this?
It's been really good. I just noticed that the energy, and I'm kind of really realizing what I wasn't eating before, that how much this is really filling that gap and not needing that extra cup of coffee later in the day.
That's awesome. Listen, we take 10 daily servings of fruits and veggies. Here they are, all in 6 small capsules. They're absolutely no trouble swallowing. They're always fresh, nothing artificial. They smell great. So invest in your health, invest in your life. Join me and experience the Balance of Nature difference for yourself for years to come. Now, for a limited time, all new preferred customers are going to get an additional 35% discount and free shipping on your first Balance of Nature order. Use discount code AMERICA. Call 800-246-8751. That's 800-246-8751, or go to balanceofnature.com and use discount code AMERICA. I'm back with Senator Ted Cruz, and we're talking about woke culture and how to fight it in politics and more broadly in society. Ted, you said something very provocative, that the right needs to figure out a way to change within the minds of these corporate and perhaps military leaders the calculus that drives them to cowardice, the calculus that makes them submit so cravenly. So let's talk about how the right can do that. Let me throw out an idea. It seems to me that the Republicans have been perceived, and they're perceived correctly, as the party of the nice guys, as the party of the people who will not call you names, as the party that plays by the rules. So we're not likely to mobilize our shareholders to put pressure on CEOs. We're not likely to show up outside their homes and berate them. We don't have the kind of names to call them that the left does. So I guess what I'm asking is, you and I are sort of products in our youth of the Reagan years, the gentlemanly strategy that came of age. Is that era obsolete? And is it the case now that we are in a more combative environment where we have to consider strategies that we previously would not even have dreamed of?
So we're certainly in a more combative environment. One of the things is look, the Marxists understand the power of institutions. They understand taking them over. Here's a project I would suggest to you, Dinesh. Take a look at the Fortune 100. Just print out a list of their boards of directors. There are virtually no open Republicans on the boards. They don't exist. Al Gore is on the board of Apple. There are leftists on the boards of all of the big companies. One of the things the left did, there are only a couple of search firms where you find board members for Fortune 100 companies. The search firms are all controlled by hard leftists. So when there's a vacancy, they give them a choice of 3 leftists. Which one do you want? Woke capital, Wall Street is entirely woke. And one of the things to understand is it is not remotely educated. So I'll give an example. Several years ago, 2 of the big banks, Bank of America and Citigroup, decided they were going to decree gun control laws. And so Citigroup said, we will not bank any company that sells firearms to anyone under 21. Bank of America said, we will not bank any company that sells so-called assault weapons. And I sent letters to both of the CEOs, ripping them a new one. And pointing out that we had just given, the federal government had given the banks billions of dollars in the financial crisis in TARP. That was before I was in the Senate, but the federal government had given billions to the banks, and now they were using that money to undermine the Second Amendment rights of Americans. Well, I'll tell you, Bank of America sent their senior executives to my office. They sat right here in this office, and they were trying to backtrack a little bit. And the executive who had written the policy about guns was a woman who was a senior vice president. She was sitting there, and I turned to her and I said, tell me, what is an assault weapon? And she says, it's a machine gun, right? And I just had to laugh. I said, no, actually, that's not what is called an assault weapon. A machine gun is a fully automatic rifle. Fully automatic machine guns have been functionally illegal for 80 years now. What is called an assault weapon is a semi-automatic weapon. It's basically a scary looking gun. But I pointed, I said, look, you wrote the damn policy and you don't even know what the thing is that you're banning. You're so ignorant that you're going to ban something. And I said, if only there were an institution that were designed to study issues and to hear experts on both sides. And if maybe that institution was somehow designed to be reflective of the views of the American people and represent them. Wait, there is. It's called the United States Congress. That's our job. You know what? You don't hire me to invest your deposits. And what was revealing about that, this was not a heart issue of, oh, we've studied gun control, we want to engage in it. This was just give them what they want. This was a virtue signal for the country club. We've got to change that calculus. And I'll tell you one of the things that is being successful. A handful of red states are cutting off cash to institutions that go woke. And so Texas, for example, this last legislative session passed 2 different bills, one of which says if you boycott oil and gas, Texas won't invest in you. Our pension funds won't invest in you. Our university endowments won't invest in you. And the other said, if you undermine our Second Amendment rights, Texas won't invest in you. And I usually stay out of state legislative fights. You know, I've got enough fights in Washington that I don't need to be down in Austin in those fights. I engage on those bills and publicly advocated that Texas needs to use the billions in capital that the state controls to not fund the Marxists who are destroying the country. And I got to tell you, those bills and other red states are following have Wall Street freaked out right now. If you look at a lot of the big banks are not doing municipal bond offerings in Texas anymore, and it's because of their woke policies are now costing them money. We need to find more ways to make it expensive to go woke so that corporate America will just butt out. I don't want them to be conservative warriors. I want them, you know, to sell hamburgers and not to be the economic enforcers for the Democratic Party.
Very interesting. If we come back to the example that you used of the woman who wrote the law about guns that she doesn't understand, do you think that her psychology was, hey, listen, we who are operating under capitalism are under the control of people who despise capitalism. Now, they could do one of two things. They could try to control the banks and take over the banks and nationalize the banks. And in that case, our business would be completely ruined. Or they could ask us to do the BLM fist and boycott companies that sell guns. And those are more tokenistic things for us to do. So by doing moral exhibitionism in those things, we can sort of protect our core business. Could it have been a Machiavellian strategy to sort of minimize the cost of having the bad people, the outlaws, in a sense, in charge of Fort Knox?
Yeah, look, I think it's some of both, and I don't know the relative balance between the two. One of the things with the banks that I asked them is have any Democratic lawmakers demanded you do this? How much of this is extortion? How much of this is politicians or bureaucrats saying, you know, not nice bar you have here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. There's some element of that in that Democrats have discovered they can't pass their bills through the democratic process. So it's much easier to use Wall Street and to use money to force people to do it. That there is a component, but there's also just a soft virtue signaling, which is all of these executives, the country clubs they go to, are just comfortably left. And frankly, it makes them feel nice to say, you know, gun control is so good, and so we're mandating it. And they don't even know that. They don't know the details of it. Look, these airline CEOs, Delta came out against Georgia's voting rights law. American came out against Texas's voting rights laws. When you press the CEOs, and as I said, I know them both well, they don't know anything about the bills. They have no idea what's in the bill. So just like the banks on gun control, these are not hard issues. A bunch of people got angry with them, and they gave them what they want to make them go away. That's the transaction that's going on. But I think the left has discovered this is really powerful. So, for example, there is an effort from leftists. Take a look at Trump administration former officials. Cabinet members, virtually none of them are on the boards of any company. But not only that, leftists have created databases of every person that worked as a political appointee in the Trump administration, and they're trying to get whatever person hires them to fire them. Look, you and I were both young political appointees in our 20s and 30s. And that's how people start their career. And it's becoming the case where people's careers are destroyed, where they go after and they target, you know, not just powerful people, but young people early on, and they're changing the cost benefit analysis. So the next 20 something that is saying, do I go work in a Trump administration? The rational decision is going to be no, because I don't want the barbarians coming for me. And that's a really dangerous weaponization of woke politics.
I mean, it's a measure, isn't it, of the power of the left, that they don't even feel that they need to persuade the CEO about the issue. They have so much power that they're like, listen, we are just going to say jump, and you're going to say how high.
And you're right. And you don't have many paragons of virtue. Look, just one CEO who you got 20 leftists who come in all screaming. I'd like to see one CEO say, well, thank you for sharing your views. You're fired. that would do some real good. Seeing a company that had courage. Look, here's a problem as a consumer. All right, I don't like all these woke airlines. I can't boycott them. What am I supposed to ride a horse and buggy to get back and forth to Texas? Like, I got to get on the damn planes. So they've got a monopoly. Major League Baseball. They canceled the All-Star game in Atlanta. Infuriated me. Now, I suppose I could boycott them, but I like sports. And by the way, my Astros were in the World Series. So, they kind of have you captured. One of the problems is conservatives really stink at boycotts. We're just not good at it. Now, personally, Nike has been so bad. I have been a almost exclusively Nike consumer for 48 years of my life. Like literally every tennis shoe I own, every short, every T-shirt was Nike. I won't buy Nike anymore. I just don't do it because they're so glorifying in attacking America and hard leftism that I don't want it. And look, I mean, they don't care about my money. It's not much. We've got to find ways that have greater value. I'll tell you an idea that I've floated to several people. You remember the whole GameStop Robinhood thing?
Yep.
Where you saw crowdfunding that impacted and radically affected the stock price of GameStop. An idea that I've floated is if you had a group of people who control significant capital on the right, either conservatives or libertarians, who publicly stated the next major company that goes woke, we're going to short their stock. We're going to target them. And if, let's take Delta for an example, if when Delta takes its virtue stand on the Georgia voting rights law without knowing anything about it, if suddenly their stock were shorted and it dropped 20%, and all of the executives, their stock options were now worthless, that would get their attention. And I got to say, you don't have to do it once or twice for the next C-suite sitting there analyzing it to say, you know what? I don't want that to happen to me. You only need one or two pelts on the wall when suddenly the cost-benefit analysis doesn't work. Now, I've floated this to a number of people in the financial world and hedge funds, and it may not work. And that's not my world. So I know just enough about it to be dangerous. But there's got to be a way for the apolitical CEO to perceive a real economic cost to giving into the mob. Unless we can change that dynamic, people are going to respond to incentives. That's what they do. And right now, the incentives are screwed up, and the left knows that. Ironically, for a bunch of Marxists, they actually understand incentives, and they've created a system where the incentives are all on their side.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I would call it the pistol whipping strategy, Ted. It's like John Wayne going into the bar. The bad guys are there. He doesn't know exactly who they are, but he pistol whips a couple of guys, and it's like, hey, guys, there's a new sheriff in town. This message is something imperative for our side. Thank you very much, Ted Cruz, for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks, Dinesh.
Aren't you sometimes a little sick of the news? I mean, every day it's the left trying to make another money grab, whether it's spying on your accounts, taxing your unrealized gains. There's no shortage to their demented creativity when it comes to taking your hard-earned money to fund their radical agenda. I want to make something clear. You're making a big mistake if you're not diversifying your savings. And the way to do that, hold gold in a tax-sheltered account, or just buy gold and hold it at your home in your safe. I buy my gold from Birch Gold. It's the only company I trust and recommend. When you buy gold from Birch Gold by December 23rd, they'll send you free gold for every $10,000 that you purchase. It's the first time they've ever offered free gold. With thousands of satisfied customers, an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau. Now you can trust Birch Gold to protect your savings. Text Dinesh to 484848 to claim eligibility for their free gold with purchase offer by December 23rd. Again, text Dinesh to 484848 and protect your savings today. So the Democrats went to the Hispanic community and basically said, we have a new name for you. And the Hispanics are answering, no, thank you. You don't get to name us. The name, of course, is Latinx. Now, when I first heard Latinx, I thought, well, that sounds a bit like Malcolm X. But in fact, Latinx is, well, it's a term that came out of the LGBTQ community. And think here about the arrogance of the left. You know, they've got this sort of coalition of identity politics of race, gender, sexual orientation. And the term Latinx reflects the triumph of the gender, sexual orientation part over the race part. So the Democrats want to court Latinos. In fact, they have had Latinos and Hispanics largely in their camp. But the Democrats have been pushing the Hispanics away just as the Republicans are getting better, more sophisticated. And look, for Republicans, you know, there was a horrific tendency to ignore Asian Americans, ignore Latinos, basically say that these groups are sort of like the blacks. We're not going to win them anyway, so let's not try too hard. And the Republicans in many areas didn't try at all. But now Republicans realize that there's fertile ground with the Asian Americans, fertile ground with Hispanics. Republicans are getting much smarter about this. And the beauty is that this Latinx thing is turning out to annoy, antagonize, and repel Hispanics. So there's a poll just out, nationwide poll of Hispanic voters. The number of Hispanics who refer to themselves as Latinx, 2%. 68% call themselves Hispanic, 21% prefer Latino. So you add those two, pretty much all Hispanics call me Hispanic, call me Latino. And Latinx is just basically a non-starter. Now, the reason for Latinx is that Spanish is a gendered language. Spanish has nouns that typically end in A for the feminine and O for the masculine. Hence Latino, the male, and Latina, Debbie, the female. But apparently the LGBTQ types don't want gendered language. So they want to browbeat the Hispanics into giving up Latino and Latina, in fact, giving up Hispanic and taking up Latinx. And because here's the Virginia Republican Attorney General-elect. This is Jason Miyares, who's, by the way, Cuban. And he goes, progressives are engaging in a type of cultural Marxism, a recasting of societal norms. And he goes, go for it, guys. He goes, quote, I believe that every time they use the term Latinx, they lose another Latino vote. And one of the founders of Univision, this is Joaquin Blaya. Yeah, Univision. Debbie goes, Dinesh, this is the Indo-European accent of yours trying to pronounce Spanish words. Well, anyway, this guy says, Joaquin Blaya, he says, listen, you know, we've built this whole channel, Univision, you could say the same of Telemundo. He goes, using the Spanish language as the common denominator. He says, we can't start, we're not going to talk about the Latinx. He goes, quote, it's too weird, it's dumb, it's foreign, and it's not Spanish. So where this is going is that the left is blindly, in its usual bludgeoning style, trying to compel the Latinos to sing to their music, their politically correct music, their woke music. And the Latinos, some of them are playing along, a few, and some of the Latino leadership is going along because, of course, they're all kind of in the swamp together. But the rank and file Hispanics, the rank and file Latinos might end up saying adios to the Democratic Party itself. One of the things I found out about pain is it disrupts your normal life like nobody's business. I mean, you're reading a book and you're like, oh, I got a pain in my knee, and so you can't concentrate. And these aches and pains, man, I mean, I think now that we're reaching our age, Debbie and me, these happen to us, right? It can be the normal wear and tear of time. It can be injury. But here's the good news. There's a 100% drug-free solution. It's called Relief Factor. Relief Factor supports your body's fight against inflammation, and inflammation is the source of aches and pains. The vast majority of people who try Relief Factor order more. Why? Because it works for them. Debbie, she's been suffering with frozen shoulder for a couple of years. She said, let me try. And she found it works amazingly well. Her pain went away, and she knows if she doesn't take Relief Factor, the pain is going to come right back. So she's made a vow never to be without it again, being able to lift her arm, exercise. This is super important to her. Relief Factor is the tool she needs, and she's glad she's got it. Now, you too can benefit. Try it. You'll see. Order the 3-week quick start for the discounted price of only $19.95. Go to relieffactor.com or call 833-690-7246 to find out more about this offer. That number again, 833-690-7246, or go to relieffactor.com. Feel the difference. I want to talk about the death of Roseanne Boyland, who may very well turn out to be the second Trumpster deliberately killed in the January 6th protest. Now, with Roseanne Boyland, when she died, the medical examiner said she died of, quote, acute amphetamine intoxication. This is almost certainly false. And let's remember the medical examiner here is a guy who's been trying to cover up for the left, cover up for the police, cover up the actions of the government itself. This is the same guy who intentionally delayed the results on Capitol Police Officer Sicknick. He allowed all these lies to get out. Oh, Sicknick was killed by a fire extinguisher, New York Times. Sicknick was killed by bear spray. Finally, the medical examiner let out the truth. Sicknick was killed by, quote, natural causes. Now, with regard to Roseanne Boyland's death, there's video in the tunnel, in the place where Roseanne Boyland was killed, and that video quite likely shows Capitol police officers and authorities using noxious gas, poison gas, against the protesters, beating them, bludgeoning them, and then one officer, at least, dragging her lifeless body face up, kind of back into the tunnel to hide her. So in other words, to kind of take her out of public view before the paramedics showed up. So the questions being raised here involve police brutality, police misconduct, and how Roseanne Boyland really died. Now, the left, of course, does not want another Trumpster killed. They're trying to make it seem like the Trumpsters were the dangerous ones. The Trumpsters were the aggressors. And it's quite possible, as I say, that the video is going to show the exact opposite. Now, the government has been reluctant to release the 14,000 hours of total video, but they've been forced selectively. As defendants have said, you're accusing me of something that I supposedly did inside the tunnel. Well, you know what? You've got the video. Let's have the video. I need the video for my defense. And so some of this video is grudgingly is coming out. It's being released to the defense. And of course, once it appears in a trial, it becomes public. So it's almost as if, and this is an article by Julie Kelly talking about this in American Greatness, she goes, it's almost as if the left knows that something big is going to come out on Roseanne Boyland. And what they want to do, which is really very insidious, is they want to make it seem like Roseanne Boyland deserved to die. In other words, she was a domestic terrorist. She was an insurrectionist, a seditionist. She's like bin Laden. And so, yeah, if we killed her, well, you know what? That was probably a good thing. The people who killed her were not monsters. They weren't thugs. They weren't thugs with badges. Rather, they were heroes. They were protecting the republic from this Khalid Sheikh Mohammed female, if you will. And the chief culprit here is MSNBC. MSNBC has begun airing a kind of a 5-part podcast. It's called American Radical. It's made by this guy named Ayman Mohyeldin. It's a kind of twisted political autopsy of her views. This is what Julie Kelly calls it. And she says it's particularly disgusting, and I agree. Why? Because obviously Roseanne Boyland can't defend herself. So you create this vile smear of the woman, and then she is, in the grave. So it's a particularly vicious thing that the left is doing. And what they do is they try to penetrate her world, talk to some family members, in some cases a brother-in-law here, a school friend there. And, most of the family talks about Roseanne Boyland. She was kind, she was generous, she was affectionate. She was, yes, she had fallen into addiction, but she was rebuilding her life. But the general thrust of the podcast, of the MSNBC show, if you will, is to try to make Roseanne Boyland into a kind of villain. No, her death should not inspire public outrage or sympathy. And the show begins really by comparing, quote, a domestic terrorist like Roseanne Boyland with international terrorists. So see, right away, the idea here is like, you've got a bunch of Syrians who are in ISIS, you've got the 9/11 hijackers, and of course the ordinary American has absolutely no sympathy for those guys. And so then the transition is to the domestic terrorists. And the idea is that these are people of an equally vile stamp. So really what's going on is a dehumanization of Roseanne Boyland by the left in preparation for a potential revelation that she was actually killed by the government, by the authorities, and under very questionable circumstances. I mean, think about it. Roseanne Boyland wasn't armed. What reason was there to beat her to death? And of course, the cover-up then. What reason was there to put out false information that she died from a drug overdose? So there's a lot of culpable authorities here, the medical examiner included. And in some ways, for me, I'm waiting for the full story, not just about Roseanne Boyland, but the full story about January 6th to be told, so that this sad chapter becomes at least an object lesson in how America, in this incident, took a dehumanizing and in some ways even a kind of fascist turn. I've been on Hillary Clinton's trail for a long time. In my film Hillary's America, I detail the dangers she posed to our country, and fortunately the American people got the message. But there's still more that must be done to reveal the full, ugly truth about the Clintons, the Clinton Foundation, and their corrupt ways, especially since the Biden family seems to view the Clintons' example as a kind of how-to guide. Now, you won't find the truth about Hillary in today's fake news media. You have to turn to a powerful source like Capital Research Center. My friends at Capital Research Center expose the left like no one else can. Now they've released an eye-opening new report which lays bare the corruption of the Clinton crime family. It's called By Hook or By Crook. Want to read it? Then go to capitalresearch.org/Dinesh. That's CAPITAL research.org/Dinesh. You'll get the chance to order a free copy of By Hook or By Crook and learn the facts the mainstream media won't touch. Once again, go to capitalresearch.org/Dinesh. Check it out. I want to conclude today my discussion of Julius Caesar. I've been focusing on the issue of tyranny and potential tyranny, and now I want to turn to the overthrowing of tyranny. I want to turn to the two main characters of the whole play, Brutus and Cassius, and ask the question of why did their plot fail? It's a little bit of a lesson here, even in a strange way, for the GOP. Why is it that an attempt to subvert tyranny does not succeed? Well, the plot begins with Cassius. He's the conniver, he's the Machiavellian, he's the organizer of the conspiracy. And remember, all conspiracies need stealth, they need organization, they need somebody who realizes this is what needs to be done, and I'm going to do what's necessary to make it happen. Now, that's Cassius. But interestingly, Cassius does not think he can carry out the plot by himself, even though he's a very resourceful guy. He needs Brutus. And so he goes to Brutus, and in the opening scenes, he's talking Brutus into joining the conspiracy. Brutus is initially reluctant, but then agrees. Now, what is the value of Brutus to the conspiracy? Well, it is that Brutus has a public reputation. And he has a public reputation for virtue. He is known to be a man who cares about Rome. He will not do things for his private interest. He's not motivated by envy or anything petty. This is a man of a noble family, of noble sentiments. And so Brutus is necessary because he will give public dignity to this assassination. Let's remember, even at the end of the play, Mark Antony gives a tribute to Brutus. And this is after the war in which Brutus is killed. Brutus commits suicide. This was the noblest Roman of them all the conspirators, save only he, did that they did in envy of great Caesar. He only, in a general honest thought and common good to all, made one of them. So Antony's saying Brutus was motivated only by a concern for Rome. Brutus loves virtue, and he's a straightforward guy. But his very virtue, and this is the key point, his very virtue leads him to make many tactical mistakes. Why? Because he's not Machiavellian. He thinks that if you do the right thing and you explain the right thing that you did, and you, in a sense, behave like a gentleman in the way that you present your case to the Romans, all will be well. But nothing could be further from the truth. Brutus makes, as I say, a series of errors. There are about 7 of them, and virtually all of them are made over Cassius's objection. I really want to focus on just 2. Here's Cassius. I'm now quoting from the text. They're organizing the conspiracy, and they're trying to get more people to their side. Brutus is now, by this time, already in. Here's Cassius. But what of Cicero? Shall we sound him? I think he will stand very strong with us. Brutus. Oh, name him not. Let us not break with him, for he will never follow anything that other men begin. So Cassius wants the silver tongue of Cicero, the famous orator of Rome, and a strong opponent of Caesar, who undoubtedly would have helped the conspiracy and would have helped to explain it to the Roman people. But Brutus writes him off and basically goes, well, if it's not his idea, he's not going to want to do it. So they don't even sound him out, as Cassius wants to do. Here's the second suggestion, again from Cassius. Brutus vetoes it, and you can see how this is a fatal error on Brutus's part. Cassius is right, and Brutus is wrong. Here's Cassius. I think it is not meet here means fit, that Mark Antony, so well beloved of Caesar, should outlive Caesar. And then a few lines later, let Antony and Caesar fall together. So here is Cassius wisely suggesting, let's get Caesar and let's get Antony. That way we root out the tyranny. We take out the big tyrant and we take out the little tyrant who is his sidekick. Here's Brutus. Our course will seem too bloody, Caius Cassius, to cut the head off and then hack the limbs. Let's be sacrificers, but not butchers, Caius. So Brutus doesn't want to kill them both. He goes, let's just get Caesar. We don't need Antony. Well, think of what a disastrous mistake this turns to be. Antony, in a sense, becomes the new apostle of Caesarism. Antony ultimately takes the Caesarist model, which is to ally the one, Antony, with the people, the many, to now overthrow the Senate and the aristocracy and establish Caesarism in Rome. The message here that we're getting is that a degree of Machiavellianism is necessary to succeed in politics. In other words, you need virtue, you need Brutus, but you also need Cassius. And it's Brutus's overriding of Cassius that shows really the key to why the plot fails. Now, notice the Machiavellianism of Mark Antony. This is from the famous speech of Mark Antony over Caesar's dead body. And he's speaking to the Roman people. He's speaking of Caesar. He had brought many captives home to Rome, whose ransom did the general coffers fill. Did this in Caesar seem ambitious? So Antony's trying to convince the Roman people Caesar's not ambitious. He goes, he has all these conquests, he got all this booty and all this money, he came back and he donated it to the state. Does that sound like it's ambition to you? And the answer is yes, it does. That is what a public man will do to sort of win over the people. No, it's not private ambition, but of course it's public ambition. Let's continue with Antony. When the poor have cried, Caesar hath wept. Ambition should be made of sterner stuff. So Antony's saying, when the poor people are suffering and crying, here's Caesar. Oh, I'm really sorry you're in this condition. Now, what is this? This is tactical tears. This is the Democratic Party. This is moist eyes. Oh, the people unemployed, the people suffering. But of course, the Democrats are only concerned about accumulating power for themselves. So what we're talking about here is the Machiavellianism of pretending to public sympathy, when in reality, Caesar's life is not the same as the life of the poor guy. You all did see that on the Lupercal I thrice presented him a kingly crown, which he did thrice refuse. Was this ambition? Yes, this is ambition. Why? Because Caesar knew that in the old days, when the Tarquin kings, who were foreign kings, ruled Rome, they wore kings on their heads. They wore crowns on their heads, and the Roman people hated them, and they drove out the Tarquin kings. And so Caesar realized that I can't literally put a crown on my head. I can't call myself king, so I want all the power of the king without seeming to be a king. So that is the cunning of Caesarism. Basically, what's going on is that tyrannical power is being established in Rome, but it's being established in disguise. It's being established while keeping the old forms. Oh yeah, Rome is still a republic. We don't use the word king around here. Stop calling me a king. Take away this crown. This is unseemly. Caesar wants the power of the monarchy without the name of the monarch. And so the lesson for us from the play, and also a political lesson for us, is that in fighting the dirty game of politics, particularly against Machiavellian opponents, is yes, we are the party of virtue, and we should be. That's in the end what we're fighting for. But virtue admixed with a certain degree of tactical wisdom, with a certain degree of, you may say, Machiavellianism, that's the way that you actually win on the ground.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.